Hi everybody, my name is Luis Silva. I'll be talking about the research project generating real-world evidence on bridging thrombolysis using electronic health records, a project we're starting here at the University of Minnesota. Just as a quick recap of what we were trying to do, we're comparing the use of alteplase and tenecteplase in patients who receive mechanized thrombectomy for acute large vessel occlusion stroke. So our goal is to identify patients who came in with stroke to the mHealth Fairview system, separate them into control and intervention, in our case, alteplase and tenecteplase. We're only looking at patients who receive mechanized thrombectomy after receiving the pharmacological intervention, the process called bridging thrombolysis. And for analysis, we're going to separate them into control and intervention groups, and our primary outcome will be the modified ranking scale at 90 days. One of the other goals for this project is to automate the process of grading the patients in the modified ranking scale. So we want to develop a natural language processing tool to do that, and we're going to use a myriad of notes, of health encounter notes to do that, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that at the end of the explanation. But let's go from the beginning here. So we'll be looking at patient information from the year 2000, from January 2018 to March 2023, from these hospitals here at the mHealth Fairview system. And our first goal is to build a data mart, and the data mart is going to have information on patients regarding inclusion, exclusion, and intervention for our study. And the data mart here, what is important for us to understand is it is a very sensitive process. The process of building the data mart is very sensitive, meaning if the patient only has the inclusion criteria, or if the patient only has exclusion criteria, or if the patient only has the intervention criteria for mechanized thrombectomy, the patient is going on the data mart. Of course, we know we're studying patients who have ischemic stroke and who received the pharmacological intervention and then underwent mechanized thrombectomy. But for the processes of the data mart construction, we want to be very sensitive because we don't want to lose any sort of patients that might be on the charts. So how we do that is, I'm going to use ischemic stroke as an example for, in this case, our inclusion criteria. So what we do is we use both pieces of structured and unstructured data to find these patients. So we look for diagnostic codes. In this case, the fewest codes are ICD equivalents. So these are ICD equivalents for ischemic stroke. We also look for QI identifiers, which are universal identifiers for words and phrases related to ischemic stroke. We look for those in physician's notes, more specifically emergency department and neurology notes. And hopefully we can do the process of concept matching, which is we are only going to add patients who have both the structured piece of data and the unstructured piece of data. And once the patient has the inclusion criteria, the patient is going to the data mart. Repeat this process for the exclusion criteria here, which is hemorrhagic stroke. It's important to look at the exclusion criteria in this case specifically because this is also an adverse event of our study, so it's important to have those patients in the data mart as well. We do a similar process for mechanized thrombectomy, for alteplase and tenecteplase, and at the end we're going to have our data mart. And since the data mart is very sensitive, we expect about 10,000 patients to be included in the initial data mart, and of course we're not going to read through the data of 10,000 people. We're going to select a group of patients. Our power analysis says we should have about 344 patients, and we're going to go from 10,000 to 344 through the process of phenotyping. You can read more about phenotyping and the process we're going to use, which is called PheCap here at this paper that was published on Nature Protocols in 2019. But basically what we're doing is we'll be filtering the data mart through the use of a semi-supervised AI algorithm to define the individual's patient's probability of being part of our final cohort. So what this program does is give us a probability of how likely a patient is to be to have been a patient of bridging thrombolysis, and thus to have been a patient who is eligible for a final patient cohort. We're going to look for confounders once we build our patient cohort. So these are the confounders we're going to look for. Pretty standard for stroke research. So I'm not going to go through all of them specifically. And once again, you guys already saw this, so we're going to separate our patients into control and intervention. And our primary outcome is going to be modified ranking scale at 90 days. So we're going to look for primary carrying calendar notes for patients within the final cohort. Will be searched spanning from 30 days after hospitalization. Sorry, there is an H missing here. 30 days after hospitalization to 180 days after hospitalization. And notes closest to 90 days will be the standard for primary care outcome, meaning that if a patient in the cohort has a lot of notes in this time frame, we're going to try to use the ones closest to 90 days as the standard for the MRS assessment. And hopefully we can get lots of different types of notes, not only physicians' notes, but also occupational therapists and physical and speech language pathologists' notes. So we can build a natural language processing tool that can grade patients automatically or through automations in the MRS score. And those are the goals of the project. If you guys have any questions, please send me an email. I'll be happy to answer them. And thank you for paying attention to my presentation.